I'd like to just give a quick update on matters relating to funding of schools, since that also is in the public domain. Over the past few weeks, questions have been raised about the allocation of funds to schools. Given the recent changes made regarding funding arrangements for public education institutions, the policy on non-mandatory contributions, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information has further increased the funds allocated to schools. Grants are allocated to high schools for the following: furniture, infrastructure, maintenance, special tourism programs in schools, which is a new initiative that was announced last post-CAB. Areas such as SANS, ICT, part-time staffing, path feeding program, career advancement program, rural bus transportation, part of the rural bus pilot program, industrial technology, home economics, as well as for computer labs technicians, school support officers, as well as social premiums and general operational grants. The total non-establishment staff support to be provided to high schools for the upcoming academic year is $8,399,223,635. This represents an increase of some $435,807,270. The operational and social grants to high schools will total $3.767 billion. This is an increase of nearly $50 million. Allocations for staff and support has been increased by more than $317 million, and we have allocated 293 $292,397,984 to the Career Advancement Program, which has been rolled out in all high schools. These variations facilitate the implementation of what we call our K-13 program, or Early Childhood to Higher Education program, ensuring that all students receive a full 7-year minimum of high school education, no longer 5, but 7 as minimum for all our students, so that they will leave with a skill and improved work readiness, which are aligned to where industry requires these skills. We've also increased the path feeding grant by some $43,735,500. In regards to infant all-age primary and junior high schools, they receive similar grants as high schools, but also receive financial support for clerical assistance, environmental wardens, water, internet, janitorial support, and security grants, as well as support for cooks and canteens. The total allocation to be made for the upcoming school year for these schools across all 6 regions is $4,277,617,700. The first allocation has already been sent to schools and will assist to prepare for the upcoming start of the 2018-29 academic year in September. Another 3 tranches will follow throughout the course of the academic year. The PATH program accounts for the largest allocation to infant, all-age primary, and junior high schools, standing at $2,231,083,950 for the 2018-2019 academic year. Another $323,100,000 is budgeted for cooks, and $306,610,938 to be allocated for infrastructure and maintenance, upgrading, and support. Regular grants for these schools total some $583,780,000 has been allocated in addition to the other areas referred to previously. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Minister Reid, for informing us of the Cabinet deliberations since our last briefing. May I just point out to members of the media that as of this week, we have been publishing the Cabinet notes in the press, and so in addition to the briefings, you will also be able to access them in the press. May I now invite the Minister without Portfolio in the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, the Honorable Favour Williams, to brief you on matters of the economy.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me acknowledge Senator the Honorable Royal Reid and State Minister Green, both from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, members of the media, Press Secretary, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Much has happened in the Jamaican economy since we had our last post-cabinet press briefing on July 11th. So let me just summarize. To begin with, I'm pleased to note that inflation is remaining very contained at 2.1%, point to point, or June to June, or for the last 12 months period, whichever one you may choose. When we last spoke, we did report on inflation, but that was for the 12 months ended May, and that was 3.1%. We're reporting a new number for the 12 months ending June, and that is 2.8%. Just to disaggregate, to give you a little bit more information, the Statistical Institute of Jamaica reported that for the group called housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels, that group moved up 1.2% for the period under review. And if you drill down even further to just look at electricity, gas, and other fuels, that group moved up by 2%. While the group called water supply and miscellaneous services related to the dwelling increased by 0.8% as a result of higher water and sewage rates. If we look at food and non-alcoholic beverages, that group showed very muted inflation, moving up only 0.3%, and it was primarily due to increase in vegetables and starchy foods. Higher prices were recorded for produce such as Irish potato, yam, carrot, lettuce, and onion during the month under review. In the division called transport, there was an increase in the index of about 0.8% for the period. But when you look overall, the calendar year-to-date, meaning January to the end of June, inflation was actually negative 0.3%. And if you look at the fiscal year-to-date, which is April to the end of June, inflation was zero, flat. For the month of June itself, that figure was 0.4%. And if you slice and dice it another way by looking at the Greater Kingston metropolitan area versus other areas, in the Greater Kingston metropolitan area was 0.3%. Other urban areas, 0.6%, and in the rural areas, it was 0.4%. So quite contained, quite muted, and in line with our push to have our central bank be responsible for the inflation outlook that we experience in the country. As you already know, we have a range for inflation to be in the 4 to 6% range. To the extent that it differs, to the extent that the actual outcome differs from that range, it is the responsibility of the Bank of Jamaica to explain the difference, but not just that, it has to tell the people of Jamaica how it will get inflation back into the range, and they need to explain it on both sides, whether it's below or whether it's above. So that's where we are right now in terms of inflation. The good news on that front. So I'm going to move on to another positive piece of information that came out since we last spoke with you. The ratings, the credit ratings for Jamaica was affirmed by international credit rating agency Moody's. So the rating is B3, and Moody's did two things. In addition to affirming the rating, it also changed the outlook from stable to positive. So what does all this mean? The outlook provides information to investors on the potential evolution or the potential path of a rating. Hence, the outlook helps you to, it increases the precision or the certainty of the rating. And so for rating agencies such as Moody's when they changed their outlook from stable to positive, a positive outlook means that the rating may be raised. Contrast this to the stable outlook, which means that a rating is not likely to be changed. So what we've seen is that in the space of a year and a half, not only did Moody's upgrade Jamaica's rating 2 notches to B3 stable from where it was back in November 2016, Moody's is now signaling that our credit ratings may be raised. So that's what the change in the outlook means when it goes from stable to positive. In our debt markets, I'm pleased to report as well that Jamaica repaid $58 billion of debt over the last week and a half or so. The government only had a need to borrow back 10 billion of that from the market. And I want to just talk with you about how this was structured. The government borrowed 2 different tranches, 5 billion each. And it was able to borrow $5 billion for 30 years at a fixed rate of 7.09%. 30 years, the interest rate will not change in the local currency. This is an absolutely new phenomenon for the government. We have always had a government that has not been able to raise long-term money in the market. If you remember back, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or so years ago, investors were only willing to lend 3 months, 6 months, maybe 18 months, not very long. But we're seeing where there is significant confidence in the government to the point where investors are willing not only to lend for a long period of time, but they're willing to fix the interest rate that they charge the government on that. Compare the 7.09% to a similar 30-year bond that the government issued in May of last year, and it issued that at 11%. So you can see how far we've come in a very short period of time, and I believe we have much to celebrate when we look at the trend in interest rates. They're coming down, not just for the government, but for businesses, and I dare say for individuals. We also we also had the official opening ceremony of the Office of the Special Economic Zone Authority. As you may recall, the SEZ Act was passed in 2016 as one initiative to attract foreign investors so that Jamaicans would be able to link up with the foreign companies that are operating in the SEZ and be able to expand their output and expand job opportunities for Jamaicans. On the fiscal side, tax revenues remain buoyant relative to the budget. We also want to reiterate that the 7% primary surplus still anchors our economic and fiscal program, and of significance to remind everyone that our debt trajectory towards at least 60% debt to GDP by fiscal 2025-26 remains on that path. And that summarizes the activity for the economy since we last spoke. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Minister Williams. Certainly several key points raised there in your presentation that I believe members of the media would be grateful to have heard. May I now then invite the State Minister in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, the Honorable Floyd Green, to give us an update on youth, especially youth employment over the period.
Thank you. Ministers Reid and Williams, Press Secretary Francis, other members of the team from the Office of the OPM and the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, members of the media. Good morning, everybody. One of the areas that has been a priority focus of this administration has been trying to ensure that we get our youth the necessary work experience, especially during the summer months. We have recognized, and it's part of our new youth policy, that there has to be a focus on employment, and that one of the deficiencies was that a number of our young people end up leaving our secondary school system and our tertiary school system without having the necessary work experience. And as such, we have been on a drive over the last 2 years to expand the amount of summer employment opportunities that we are able to offer. And we have taken quite a strategic approach to that expansion. And one of those approaches has its foundation in the merger of the Heart Trust NTA with the National Youth Service and the Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning. And one of the benefits of that merger is that what is commonly known as the National Youth Service Summer Program, we've been able to tremendously expand that, rebrand that, and align that with other policy priorities of the government. So the program is now known as the Hope Youth Summer Work Program. It does target young people between the ages of 17 and 29 years, and they are, during the summer, placed in various entities for a period of 3 weeks where they will gain necessary skills. In fact, even before they are placed, they have to go through an interview process, and they get training and orientation. And this, again, is part of our Housing Opportunity Production and Employment Program. We were able to significantly raise our numbers. In the first year, we were able to do 6,000 young people, but after recognizing the benefits of the merger, last year we were able to target 14,000 young people that were placed across the length and breadth of Jamaica. We expanded the phases, so we used to place young people only in July and August. We decided to have a June phase, especially to target our high school students. One of the big changes that we've also made is that there used to be a requirement that you had to have a certain number of CXC subjects to be able to qualify for the program. But we were of the view that the young people who oftentimes need the program the most are those who do not yet have CXC subjects, and as such, we removed that requirement. With that said, we've already completed 2 phases for this year, and I'll just give you the number. In June, we were able to place 5,482 young people. In July, we have now been able to place 6,567 young people. So we've already surpassed over 12,000 young people that have been placed thus far for this summer. We expect to place an additional 4,010 young people in the month of August, which would bring our placement of youth to 16,000 young people that will be placed during this summer. One of the things that's very important to note is we are also running a pilot program because we now have the Heart Trust NTA. So we have assessed some of the young people who, through their placement, will be able to satisfy some of the requirements in relation to certification. And we're trying to see if we can, out of this 16,000, be able to certify at least 6,000 of those 16,000 that are placed this year. We had raised the stipend that we pay our young people, and I think it is very important to repeat so we know the levels at which our youth are being paid for this summer employment. Our tertiary students, they get a stipend of $10,100 per week. Our sixth form students get a stipend of $9,000. Our secondary students get a stipend of $8,000. We also have a special focus to place our youth with disability. And as such, thus far, we have placed 82 youth with disability over June and July. So we continue to work to see how we can strengthen the program, but more importantly, to ensure that our young people get the work experience so that they can easily transition from training into gainful employment. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Green. Really appreciate that update concerning our young people, especially in the summer employment program. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, before your questions, may I just give you a brief update on the Prime Minister's travel to southern African nations of Namibia and South Africa. As you would have known, the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, left the island on Friday on an official working visit to the Republic of Namibia, and later on he will also be traveling to the Republic of, beg your pardon, this morning frogs are all around, all right. Excuse me, to the Republic of South Africa. And so let me tell you about the achievements so far. Jamaica and Namibia have agreed a visa waiver program between the two countries. Also, we signed a memoranda of understanding on sports and culture as well as political cooperation. And yesterday, the Prime Minister also had discussions with officials in Namibia, especially the Nam port, and we have agreed to pursue cooperation between the Port Authority of Jamaica and Nam Port, which is Namibia's largest port. The Prime Minister has had a very busy schedule since arriving in Namibia on Monday. He's engaged in bilaterals with the Namibian president, as well as met with sector leaders in Namibia. He's also met with Jamaican and Caribbean nationals and business interests in Namibia, and of course toured Nam Port yesterday. Of course, this is significant because what the Prime Minister is also doing is getting a first-hand view of best practices across the world in terms of port operations. As of course you know, Jamaica is committed to its logistics hub operations. Beg your pardon. All right. Very good. All right, we're back on track. Today, the Prime Minister will travel to South Africa to attend the BRICS summit. Of course, you know that BRICS is the acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And so the Prime Minister will be holding bilateral talks with some of the leaders there, as well as participate in the BRICS Plus summit, and that is very significant. He is the first Jamaican head of government and first from the Caribbean to be invited to this auspicious body. It's the 10th BRICS summit being held, and so we expect that the Prime Minister will have some amount of influence there in terms of putting the Jamaican and Caribbean agenda items in terms of climate change, sustainable development, socioeconomic matters on the table for the global leaders certainly to take note of. With those few updates, may I then invite your questions to any of the ministers on the matters that they have presented to you. And there's a mic around, so if you could please stand, identify yourself, your media entity, and ask your question. We'd be very grateful for that.
Good morning, Althea Saunders.
One sec, everybody's having a frog today, right? All right.
From the Jamaica Observer. I just
Yes,
wanted
Althea, is that mic on? Yes, okay, go ahead.
All right, Minister Reid, I wanted to ask you, it's off topic, so it's not related to anything that was discussed. On the Petrojam issue, the committee that was supposed to be set up to review, what has the other members been named?
Pardon me, could you say that again? Because I honestly didn't hear you.
Have the other members of the committee that is supposed to be set up to review Petrojam, have they been named? I know the chairman was named.
Althea, the short answer is I believe so. I can get the names for you and ensure that that gets to you. Again, any question we don't answer here, certainly we'll ensure that it gets to you. And of course, we have now a commitment to publish the notes in the media as well.
Okay.
All right?
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Around the back?
Prince Moore.
Prince.
RJR.
Yes, you have to stand though, Prince.
oh.
'Cause- yes. Thank you.
Could you indicate whether on the same Petrojam issue, whether the Petrojam board has been meeting?
Yes, I can confirm that. In fact, the Prime Minister had a tour of the Petrojam, head office 2 Fridays ago, certainly. Before, it was very important to him now that he has taken over the energy portfolio and certainly taking an eagle-eye view of Petrojam. He met with the executive management of Petrojam as well as the board. The board is active at the facility and making sure that operations are essentially normalized. The Prime Minister at that time, he met with both the board, the management and staff, committed to ensuring that Petrojam is a priority in terms of dealing with it. So yes, the board has been meeting.
Minister Williams, another topical issue has been the depreciation of the Jamaican dollar. Could you, there has been a call to explain what accounts for the latest slide in the Jamaican dollar, and how does the government plan to address this?
All right.
Thank you for the question. Well, when we look at the foreign exchange market, there are two things that are happening simultaneously that have caused a somewhat higher demand for US dollars. And I think understanding these will help us to understand the movements in the market. Number one, we're seeing companies take a look at their debt structure as interest rates in the local market have come down. And they're looking at their debt structure because a lot of companies have US dollar debt on their books. As rates converge in the local markets, it's advantageous for them to change out those US dollar loans into Jamaican dollar loans, which is excellent, which is very good. It reduces the risk to companies of foreign exchange exposure. But in executing these transactions, what actually happens is that the companies have to go into the market to buy the US dollars to repay the loan. And that causes increased demand for that. We're expecting that this will work its way through the market. In addition, if we look at what's happening in the international merchandise trade, that's our imports, we will see as well that we are importing more than we did last year. The economy is growing. We need to import more in terms of input into the production process. And when we look at the data, and I'll just give you a few data points, we see that mineral fuels, machinery and transport equipment, chemicals, manufactured goods, and food leading the increase in imports. So drilling down a little bit more, if you look at the import of mineral fuels, that was up 16.7%, and that includes crude oil and liquefied natural gas. If we look at machinery and transport equipment, that was up 24.7%. If we look at manufactured goods, we're talking about 21, almost 28%. And in the manufactured goods area, we're talking about things like iron and steel, non-metallic mineral manufacturers. So it's because of these two phenomena why we're seeing a little bit greater demand on the currency, but also to remind you that we are in a period in which the currency is going to fluctuate. If you go back and look at the data, and you go back to 1972, when the foreign exchange market was freed up, it has been a one-way movement in the currency, a one-way depreciating movement. And because of that, it was easy for people to sit on the sideline and take a bet against the Jamaican dollar. We are saying no, we have transitioned into a period in which it is not safe to take a bet against the Jamaican dollar, because we are in a period in which it's going to move up and down, and you've seen that. If you go back and look at the data, there have been at least 7, 8, or 9 times that it's gone up, come back down, gone up, come back down, because that's how a market should operate, because when that happens, it allows new foreign exchange instruments to be developed that will help businesses who have to forward buy to help them to hedge their foreign exchange exposure, and that's the kind of market we want to see develop. I am happy to know that the speculators are really, gone out of the market. It's not speculating anymore. People are really buying goods and services from international markets. We're seeing the input into the manufacturing sector, into our energy sector, into our telecom sector, and that's what's causing, we think, right now in the near term that we're in this just little greater demand, but it will work its way out. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for that response and explanation. Any other questions? Yes.
Sure. I just wanted an update on Nessel. Could you indicate whether the managing director, Ms. Carolyn Warren, is still working there? And in the same vein, why is it that no police report was requested of her to be aware of her previous conviction?
Thank you for those questions, Prince. I can say that Mrs. Warren is still there. However, your previous question will require a little bit more in terms of investigation, and that matter is still ongoing. You again.
Sure.
Yes.
Minister, I was wondering if you could address some of the concerns. There was a RGR town hall meeting last night, and residents were expressing concerns about the Hero Circle development. I was wondering if you could address some of those concerns. They had concerns about land ownership and displacement, and also a lack of communication from the government. Could you address some of those concerns?
All right. I know the matter has been before Cabinet as well. I'm not sure if Minister wants to also take that, but as someone, because the UDC falls under OPM, I can also address that. Those matters, Prince, they're still ongoing. Discussions are happening. I know that the management of the UDC has huddled, has tweaked some of the plans they have. They've also listened to a number of the points raised last night, and will incorporate them in plans that they have going forward. In terms of the whole development plan, you would have realized, based on a release that we have, that the the SDC will also be brought into the whole matter to ensure that the people on the ground will have some amount of communication going forward as well. Did you get that release that we sent out on Monday concerning the SDC's role? Okay, sure. You have another? Minister? Right. Okay. Are there any other questions? Prince? Perhaps? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention this morning and for attending our post-cabinet media briefing. Certainly we'll be back again, and we'll update you on matters having to do with cabinet and their deliberations. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everybody.